Morning, almost afternoon, almost midday. Good, almost midday. Morning, wherever you are in the world, evening, wherever you are in the world. So, one of the things that I didn't cover in the last podcast that I want to cover now, which is really important when you're going through an ascension, when you're going through the healing process, especially the demagnetization process, which I call the underworld stage of ascension. The underworld stage of ascension, you'll hit the underworld many, 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 many times when you're going through your ascension process, depending on how well you handle tests and trials that are put on your path. And even when, because there's 7 elemental stages of an ascension, and even when you're in the 6th and 7th stage, you're going to be tested. Trials and tribulations and dramas are going to be put in your path to see how you handle them, to see whether you're readily willing to go back to the same patterns of how you used to deal with them in the past, like fear, anxiety, overthinking, running to alcohol, drugs, that sort of thing, becoming aggressive, abusive behaviour, self-abuse, self-bullying, bullying others, that sort of thing. It's not until you're able to walk through the fire and the purification process without it touching you, that you're considered fully healed, and fully purified. And it has nothing to do with religion and everything to do with burning away all the things in you that are like, imagine you're going through life walking around in the middle of a thorny bush. You're surrounded by nettles and rose thorns, and every movement you make stings and burns and bites at you. Only once you're able to walk through the bush when it's on fire, and life is hard enough. But then when you get governments threatening you and people threatening you and people who are jealous and envious of your process and all that sort of thing, then the trials are put in your path to see whether you're able to walk through those thorny bushes, without it touching you. Once you're able to do that, then you're considered purified and healed. It's like, you have to put an energetic, emotional, protective barrier around you so that you don't become touched by the thorny bushes of the outside world and your society and your social circle and your relationships and stuff. And there's 2 types of people that you're going to have in your life while you're going through this entire process, and who you have in your underworld stage, which is when you're coming to the realization that, there's things you need to work on. There's people you need to get away from. There's things you need to let go of, that you're ready to make a change in your life, that the life you're living and the person you are, you don't want to do that anymore. You can't do it anymore. And it's the reason why the people that you have in your life during this process is so important, is because 99.9% of the people who are going through this process end up giving up. It's too hard. So they fall into the addictions, and the addictions can be relying on prescription medication like painkillers or antidepressants, sleeping tablets, that sort of thing. And not just alcohol or self-harm or being self-abusive. I call it self-bullying. You look in the mirror, you call yourself names. You're mean to yourself. You punish yourself for failing at things or for not being like everyone wants you to be. The reason why it's so important is that, and trust me, I know, because I'm an ascension scientist. I know better than anyone in the world how this works, is that for the people who give up, most of them don't survive. They either let their addictions and that, or their choices in life get them to the point where they end up making really bad decisions, where they end up losing everything, everyone, like in a bad way, like how how you see a lot of homeless people and that have addictions, and they do whatever they can to feed those addictions and blah blah blah. We all know them. My ex lives in a neighbourhood that I got to watch a lot of patterns and behaviour of the people around there, because he lives around homeless encampments and all of that. So my children are in the den of thieves and drug addicts and drug dealers, and it's horrible. When they came to me, they just couldn't get over how peaceful and quiet it was here, until the stuff kicked off with the neighbours, and that it was just peaceful and quiet. Now, luckily, we've got peace and quiet again. Everything's calmed down again. Not that they were exposed to what was going on, but all that stuff luckily kicked off once they were no longer here. They didn't have to witness what was going on, but now everything's returning to normal again. I had to come in and sort everybody out in all different kinds of ways, and now we've got peace and quiet again. Everybody's respecting each other again. Everybody's respecting each other's boundaries again. And it was exhausting, and I was thrown into situations I didn't want to be thrown into, but I'm grateful they happened at the time when my boys weren't around it, because they're having to deal with enough on their dad's side of town. And it's worse with him because, but anyway, so most people, when they're going through the underworld stage, they fall back on drugs and alcohol, or self-abuse, or self-neglect, or they start abusing other people. They take their stress out on everybody else, which is what my exes did. Every time something went wrong with my ex, he took it out on me, and he took it out on the boys, and then I would be yelling at the boys, and it was just horrible until I made the choice. I can't do this anymore. My boys were little, and I didn't want what they were growing up around to affect them as adults. I didn't want them to have that life. So I worked on myself. And because of that, their father and everybody else got jealous. They said I was faking it, that I was lying, that it was all an act. But now everybody knows it's not an act, because I became a master maker. When you're going through the darkest stages of your life, where you feel like you just can't do it anymore, or like when you're going through the demagnetization process where you don't understand what's going on, who you have around you at the time is really important, because they are going to be the difference between whether you live or die. And if you're around people that feed you the fear and feed you the negativity, and you're around the gossip and the bad behavior and the negativity and all that, it feeds into that darkness and you can't escape it. And then because you don't understand what's going on, you turn to the drugs and the alcohol and the bad behavior, the fast driving, the getting into fights, the violence, the abuse, the sexual. You go out and you start sleeping around with a lot of people, like my exes, unprotected sex that can lead to STDs and, unwanted pregnancies and all that sort of thing. I mean, my ex is now on a watch list for, he got such a bad reputation for sleeping around that he ended up on a watch list for women to say, don't date this guy. Negative behaviour. You start eating unhealthy, and then the ones that just give up completely end up taking their own lives. And that's why when you're going through an ascension, who you have in your life at the time is the difference between whether you live or die. And thankfully, I've always been the one that everybody goes to for advice and for help. I was always told that I was wise beyond my years. People used to say, how do you know this stuff? When I was little and that, but it's because I'm an oracle. It's in me to know how to problem solve and help people. So you have two types of people in your life. You have the master makers and you have the master manipulators. And the master manipulators, especially when you're going through, if you've been diagnosed with so-called mental health disorders and all of that, and I noticed that when I was locked up, All the ones that sat and talked about everybody else sat in little groups. The ones that caused all the trouble in the wards sat in little groups and picked and gossiped about each other that would cause fights in the wards. They'd be packing tantrums. They would be crying and using emotional manipulation and that to try and get away with things. And it's unhealthy behaviour. And the other thing I couldn't get over was how happy people were to line up to have their medication fed to them. They were just happy to be fed this medication. And it's no judgment on the girls, because there's so many girls in there that I loved with all my heart, that I had so much respect for. But because we were going down different paths, I can't be around people who don't want to heal themselves. I can't be around people who are just happy to take the medication and not ask questions. Compliance. I can't be around people who comply. And a prime example of a master manipulator, or the master manipulator dynamic in society, is Keir Starmer and the Labor government. See how they do this thing of, we're going to bring in so that the DWP can check your banks, and we're going to bring in an AI system that we're going to have you arrested if the AI thinks that you have the potential to commit a crime. And that's using manipulation tactics in order to have control over the situation. Because if you look at Keir Starmer and David Lammy and that, these were people that were diagnosed with learning disabilities, who were bullied at school, who were, as we know, with Keir Starmer hanging around Savile and now doing what he's doing with the child grooming and all of that. These were people who were raised in unhealthy dynamics, who were abused on a societal level where it messed with their mental health. So then when they were given positions of power, they then turned that power into mental mind games and emotional manipulation in order to punish their bullies. So the way that him and Lammy and all the people in his government that are making these laws, these are all coming from people who were deemed to be rejects in society in a way that mentally deformed their psychological structure, so that when they became adults and they got that power, that's why they became lawyers and doctors and that, because it's all about having control over other people on a subconscious level. The way that Keir Starmer and his government are using these tactics, these emotional tactics and manipulations on society, the same with von der Leyen and all of them, the whole coalition of Epsteiners and Trump and that, it's because they were bullied at school. They were, most of them, I don't know about Keir Starmer, but I know that everybody else I've looked at had mother issues. Their own mothers didn't like them. Their fathers were abusive, emotionally unavailable, that sort of thing. So it damaged them psychologically. So the second they get any type of power, they turn that into control. Because they couldn't control their situation as kids, they then punish their bullies by controlling society as adults. Instead of just confronting their bullies, Keir Starmer used to wet himself. Like that's a known fact. He used to wet himself because he had no control over himself. Now that he was put into position of Prime Minister, he uses his position to control other people, because in the recesses of his subconscious mind, he's punishing his bullies. So he's taking his childhood abuse and childhood traumas, as is the Labor government. Most of them have been done for crimes against children and stuff. They're using that lack of control that they had as children to punish society in order to get back at the people who bullied them or neglected them while they were growing up as kids. So it has a knock-on effect. And that's the one thing that's one of the reasons why I have gone out of my way to fight tooth and nail, to hammer out all my kinks and straighten my armour up, because I didn't want my boys to ever grow up as adults not feeling like they weren't in control of everything. which is why every decision I've made since I became a mum, I brought my boys into it. What do you think? This is what I'm planning to do. This is what I'm thinking. What do you think? Getting their opinions to make them feel like their opinions and our little family dynamic mattered, because it does. Every financial outcome. I even let them have control over the food we eat and the food we buy and what we want to do with our day. And when we used to get locked inside, you know, letting them have control over the movies we watched and the games we played in that, so that they always felt like they were included in the process of how I run our home. And even now, when I've talked about, you know, when I do get justice and I get the money, other than you know, what I want to do with the school, we've talked about, because I've promised them that they would get a cut, that I would give them money as compensation. They would be getting their own compensation for what we were put through. I'd be giving them a cut of the money because they've had to suffer as much as I have. They've been a part of this as much as I have. And as unfair as what it is, it's taught them valuable life lessons that they will take with them as adults now, and they will know how to deal with every and all situations. Because the thing is, with master manipulators, and the doctors at the hospital were master manipulators, forcing people to think that their way, like it was their way or the highway, or if you didn't do it their way, they were going to lock you in your room and hook you up to a drip and keep you quiet and strap you down and inject you and threaten you with all sorts. You know, that's master manipulator tactics. And these people were just happy to go along with it, which is exactly what they want. They want people to sit down and shut up. They don't want people thinking for themselves. They don't want people having to problem solve. We're born with we're born with instincts. Our instincts is primal. We have them, you know, whether we tune them in or not. And then our intuition is something that we gradually gain the longer we live. We become more intuitive when our instincts are primed. Your instincts is what keeps you alive. That's your fear, fight, or flight response. It's the your instinct kicks in before your intuition does, because a lot of people ignore their intuition. And if you're on medications for depression and that, it completely wipes your intuition, because it cuts off all the parts of your brain that tells you you're in dangerous situations, or that you need to rethink your situations. One of the best pieces of advice that my sister ever gave me when I was growing up is if ever you have to think twice about a situation, you're being told it's not right. And these people that are put on medication for depression and stuff like that, they have all of that removed, because they rely on other people to tell them what to think and what to feel. And it removes their basic instinct, their survival instincts. It completely removes that. If there was ever an apocalypse and we all had to rely on ourselves to survive, I know that me and my boys would be able to head off into the hills, and I'd know how to, the three of us would know how to survive. They were raised how to build shelters and light fires, and, you know, I've taught them all that sort of stuff. I've taught them how to cook. I've taught them how to, like, basic sewing. I've taught them all that sort of stuff, because believe it or not, knowing how to sew comes in very handy if you have to go out into the hills and stuff, you know, to learn to survive. And nobody's taught that anymore. Kids aren't taught this sort of thing, and it is important. You know, how to survive if you have no water and electricity. What do you do? If you don't have access to money and food, what do you do? If you have to head for the hills, 99.9% of these people who are sheeple and who have these medications and that wouldn't have the first clue to know how to survive. So if you can't survive in the middle of nowhere, out in the bush, if you wouldn't last a day out in the bush, if you wouldn't know how to build a shelter in the bush, or, you know, a basic raft to get across the water to get to the fruit on the other side, you're screwed. And then what happens is all of them then start relying on people like me to fix everything. And then it's like, why should I have that pressure? Do you know what I mean? So your master manipulators are the ones who will make any and all excuse to not fall into line, to not have social graces, to not have morals and ethics and integrity and honour and valour and grace and decorum and, social awareness, packing tantrums like in the middle of town and that, how embarrassing. Like, it's just like nobody has humility anymore. Nobody has any virtues anymore because it's been drummed out of them to not be self-reliant, to not figure stuff out themselves. I'm one of these people, it's like if you're constantly getting into bad relationships or you're still with the same person after 10 years and you're miserable because you're not speaking out, and it's showing on your face that you're stuck in an unhealthy relationship, don't come crying to me every time you come to visit about how unhappy you are and how she's always doing this and he's always doing that and blah, blah, blah. Because you're more than likely, if you're that kind of person, the people you're going to have your little gossip session are more than likely the ones that are going to be feeding you the negativity back. Whereas I'm the sort of person that will say, well, that's clearly narcissistic abuse, you need to leave. Or that's clearly, now I know, well, him holding funds from you, or who doing this to you, or constantly accusing you of cheating with other women, that sort of thing. She's dealing with issues that she's taking out on you, that you're carrying the baggage for, and the only way you're going to deal with it is either to put your foot down to her and say stop, like no more, or leave. I give people logical, common sense, like logic, doubt, reason, common sense, compromise. They're all parts of the subconscious mind that people who are master manipulators or who fall prey to master manipulators have had completely removed from them, because they were either controlled growing up, they had to grow up too fast. You usually find that when kids have been forced to grow up too fast, they've had to take on a lot of adult responsibility too fast. They end up being very controlling when they're adults, or they let other people, like they give over their control to other people, because then they don't have to worry about having to deal with themselves, look after themselves, raise themselves. So you'll fall into codependent relationships, and it's not healthy. So then I come along, the master maker, where all I want to do is bring the best out in people. I want to heal the worst, darkest parts of people's minds, to balance their subconscious mind so that they eradicate paranormal activity, and all mental health diagnoses all fall under the category of paranormal, all of them. And I want to heal that side of them so that they can be master makers themselves, so that when they've healed, they can then turn around and say to other people, this is what I did, and it's different strokes for different folks. How I did it might not be suitable for everybody else, because I'm quite disciplined, because I was raised by a military father and a nurse mother. So it was all about, I had a very regimented upbringing. Everything had to be done by a certain time. Things had to be done a certain way. And my father was very, because he was in the army, so I'm very regimented and militarian. It's all about structure and order and discipline and everybody working together. And when you're not in that kind of dynamic, everything falls apart, because you're only as strong as your weakest link. And if you're around all weak links, you're expected to be the strong link. That's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of burden to carry on you. So then you have to be the one that has the awareness to go, that's not my problem. I'm not dealing with that. That's you. You're an adult. When it's children, when it's your children and children, it's different, because you're the leader. You're the one that is responsible for their care and their upkeep and their safety and their protection and their psychological development, even if it's neighbours and parents of friends and the people you're at school at. If you're older than the people who are looking to you for to grow up in a safe society. You're all responsible for how the children in that society are raised, even if they're not your own children. I know a lot of people poo-poo this idea. I'm just having a drink of water, sorry, but it really does take a village to raise a child. On a psychological, societal perspective, it really does take a village to raise a child, because that child grows up and sees how everybody else is managing their life, and they learn by example. And as adults, we are supposed to be the best example of what it is to be a healthy, structured, balanced leader in society. And that's what a master maker is. They're the ones that are able to take control under stress and pressure, even with everything that society's throwing at them, with everything that has been thrown at me while I've been doing my investigations to try and protect and defend the honour of people like Vladimir Putin and the King, with all the stuff I've uncovered, with all the things I've been threatened with. I do it anyway, because as a leader, I can't falter. I can't show weakness. If I show weakness, I would be pulled down by the society that falls into that sheeple category, and then everybody who's relying on me to help them, lead them to battle and out the other side of that thorny bush, would then lose faith in me and give up having hope that we're ever going to find victory in this battle in defeating Starmer's government and Donald Trump and all the rest of them. So I can't falter. I took it upon my shoulders from a very young age to make sure that my leadership would not be unbreakable even in the face of adversity, because I knew that there were other people in my life, even hiding in the shadows, who are looking to me to help get them through the worst times of our historical evolution, which is now. We're up against the Illuminati, we're up against these people at Davros. I always laugh when I say that. Wanting to push this New World Order agenda. There are so many people looking to people like me to help give them the answers and the hope that things aren't going to go according to plan. And in doing that, it's proven my supernatural abilities. I had to unmask myself. I had to show the true extent of my gifts and powers in that, in order to show these people I'm not someone to mess with. Donald Trump is on the brink of, he's lost everything. They're not reporting it on the news because he owns all the media. This is why him and his friends went around buying all the media, and why all his friends are people like Elon Musk and Zuckerberg and that, because they're suppressing the news. But if you look at what I've just posted, he's about to go bankrupt, Trump is. Everything I told him was happening. In my Trump Biden alligator dream, I said men in blue having secret meetings in hotels and on buses and on trains and stuff like that, trying to figure out how they were going to stop him, because he was going to take the world into a war that wasn't going to be like any other war. And that's exactly what's happened. I've just posted stuff where a lot of GOPs have been having secret meetings for months to figure out what to do to bring him down. Because he hasn't been paying his fines, he now no longer owns Mar-a-Lago. And they've frozen all his bank accounts and that. And I was telling my friend a couple of weeks ago, that's exactly what was going to happen. That God was going to make it that he had no access to money, so that when he gets extradited to the United Kingdom for to face the crimes that he's helped Starmer and the EU try and pull off to dethrone the monarchy, he would have no one backing him. I think I even said that he would need a public defender, because he wouldn't be able to afford his own lawyer, because no one's going to want to touch him with a 10-foot barge pole. So look what you made me do. But the thing is, because I'm an oracle, because I'm a master maker, I'm doing this to teach people a lesson, to recorrect the imbalances in the conscious universe, so that our children can evolve in a balanced conscious universe, where they can go to school and not have to worry about starving, where they can go to school and not have to worry about coming home to an abusive household, and that because we're putting everyone in their place. And I was sent here to put people like Donald Trump and Keir Starmer and von der Leyen and Merz and Macron and Zelensky and all of them in their place. And I had to do that by unmasking the true extent of what I can do with quantum magnetics, because it can go both ways, manipulating time to manifest reality. I can manipulate time to manifest reality so that people like Donald Trump lose everything. Because it's this or that. I can make evolution go this way, or I can make evolution go that way, depending on whether you listen to my warnings or not. And when it's getting to the point where you're threatening to, when you've been working behind closed doors to exact a plan for the last few decades to take down the monarchy, and then just completely take over Palestine that's not even yours under the guise of peace. And then Israel saying, doing that whole pretend thing of, oh, blah, 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 we're not going to be dealing with America and US now because of the whole Gaza thing. Everybody knows they're setting it up so that Israel can take over Palestine. Everybody knows it, So it's like, okay, well, you didn't listen. You kept threatening my king. You kept threatening to bomb Russia. You weren't listening. So now I have to do this because you didn't listen. So now he'll be regretting the fact he didn't listen. On New Year's Eve, he didn't listen. On Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, him and Starmer didn't listen. And now I'm exposing everything to take them down. Because I've had to let people know I'm not someone to mess with. And master makers are people that you don't mess with. Because the master makers in your life are the ones that have the control over whether your life goes this way or that way. And I'm a master maker, and so I'm removing all the debris and all the crap out of the way so that the next generation, like my kids and that, can grow up with their friends and, their kids and their grandkids and that, not ever having to worry about a president like Donald Trump or a prime minister like Keir Starmer ever again. And then I do that by putting my investigations out, by putting my messages out and waking people up and saying stop relying on governments and the media and social media and telling you what to do and what to think. Think for yourself. Get off the bloody medication. You don't need it. The medication is giving you an excuse to not have to work on yourself. You are responsible for you. Deal with your traumas, deal with the things you don't want to look at, and then heal from it. And you end up so much stronger because of it. I have spent from the age of 16 until the age of, 44, 45, living on like morphine and diazepam, like Valium and all that sort of thing, for my pain. And now I've spent years like trying out different natural pain relievers and that, and I'm stronger than ever. I'm healthier than ever. I haven't been on any prescription medication since January, February of 2016. I went off all my pain relief that I've been on since I was 16. I used to have to be hospitalised for my back pain. And then when I went off sugar and healed my body and purified my body and got rid of the toxic thought patterns and all that and my toxic environment, I'm 53. I'm telling you now, I feel like I'm 20. I've never had this kind of body. I've never had this kind of peace. Because I made the conscious effort to work on myself, and it's been bloody hard. Since 2015 until now, it's been the hardest thing I've ever had to do. It has been painful. It has been raw. I have had to let a lot of stuff out that, like poison, like I was holding poison in, and I had to let it all out. I've had to expose people and do all sorts of things that nobody else would ever dream of doing because they live in fear, because they've absorbed it, because they are letting themselves be told what to think and how to react by their governments and their doctors and their teachers and, even their parents and that. Don't say that, don't do that. I've never done that with my boys. I've let them swear. I've never ever held them back. The only thing I do is I recorrect stuff that I know that they've gotten wrong. But at the same time, I've let them recorrect me when I've gotten stuff wrong. Information wise, fact based. I got smarter homeschooling my kids because they taught me so much. And in return, I'm now teaching them, I've handed them the keys to life. Because the meaning of life is to find the meaning in life. What are you here for? The meaning of life is to find the meaning in life, in your life. What are you here for? What is your purpose? What have you come here to do? When you get to the end of your life, are you going to have regrets? Because I'm not. Well, the only regret I had is I should never have married Martin. Because now I'm legally bound to him and I want to get him off me. I can't be around anyone that's okay with being around pedophiles and child groomers and like it's the complete antithesis of what I'm here for. So the master maker, master manipulator dynamic absolutely changes the course of your evolution depending on who you allow to give you advice and how they treat your advice. And a master manipulator will never tell you when you're going down the wrong path. They encourage it. Come on, let's go out drinking. Oh, a line of Coke isn't going to hurt. Just take this tablet. You'll be fine. You'll feel good. That they feed you the toxicity. Whereas the master maker will pull you up when you're making mistakes without hesitation because they know if they don't say something and tap into your conscious mind, feed your conscious mind by awakening your subconscious mind using logic, doubt, and reason. If you take that, you're going to get sick. If you drink and drive, you're going to crash. You're going to get arrested. Oh, no, it's fine. That sort of thing. They will pull you up for your mistakes without hesitation because it's for your own good. Sometimes letting you know you're making mistakes is for your own good. Like, for example, there's been a couple of times, if you're Indigenous as well, this is a big problem, drinking and driving, when the adults are drinking and driving after you've had parties and stuff. There's been a lot of times when my siblings were going to drink and drive with my nieces and nephews in the car, and I refused to let them take the kids home. And we've walked home. I've walked home in the middle of the night with little kids in tow. Or, someone else has come along and said, here, get in the car, and we've all piled into the car. Like a car that seats like 5 people has like 9, 10 people all squished in, kids on laps, ducking them down in case the cops go past that because, I refused to let them get in the car with people who were drinking and driving. Absolutely done that 100%. I cannot stand people that drink and drive, especially because it's never the people who drink and drive that have the crashes and kill people. It's always the people they hit that pay the price. But drinking and driving with kids in the car, absolutely not. And I have dragged nieces and nephews home in the dark because I haven't let them. And then because my mum was sitting up, she's like, you know, what the hell are you doing walking around the street with the kids so late? And I said, because I wouldn't let them drink and drive. And she's like, oh, okay then. So, yeah. I've always been like that. Ever since I became an auntie, I just my mother instincts kicked in. And my boys used to say I was like Beverly Goldberg from the Goldbergs, and that's like my proudest moment because it means that I've tried to keep my kids safe. I had a lot of things that I had to make up for within myself as a mum, as a woman, as a human being. And now that I've done that, I use all my power and all my knowledge to protect everybody else and to wake everybody else up and to say to everybody else that the way they're treating you, the way they're treating us, what they're doing, it's not okay and it's not normal and it's not healthy. And if I have to lead by example, then that's what I've got to do. So the master manipulator, master maker dynamic, when you're going through an ascension, when you're wanting to better yourself and heal yourself, there's a fine line between pleasure and pain. And the master maker sometimes will have to press the bruise to make you see that something is broken underneath, whereas the master manipulator will keep poking you to make the bruise bigger so that you don't know you're broken underneath. And these medications and that are a band-aid on things that are requiring open heart surgery. And I'm one of these people, just rip the band-aid off and deal with it. You won't regret it later. I feel like if I was to list all the things that have been threatened with me since I started speaking out to protect and defend like Russia and the king and all that, I'd be here for an hour. But I've had to just. What I do is I just say to God or the ancestors, is that true? Do I need to worry? And then they'll say, just move on. I don't worry about the things you have no control over. Until things happen in your life, until it's actually there presented in front of you to have to be forced to deal with, don't worry about the things you can't control, because a lot of these people in positions of power, it's all threats to get you to comply, so that so that you're feeding their ego. People like Keir Starmer and Donald Trump are only holding on to power because it will bruise their ego and damage their pride to look like they've failed, because then it's public humiliation and they care too much about what other people think. If you don't care about what people think, nothing anyone says or does to you is gonna, like, it's like water off a duck's back. The only person I worry about letting down is God. I know there's going to be a million times in my life where my boys are going to feel like I've disappointed them and stuff like that. But as long as I keep leading by example and showing them what I've done to deal with every and all situation, then if they ever go through it themselves, and they will, they're going to be judged and treated like crap by people, especially because of our bloodline. Because our bloodline's been exposed, which was the prophecy. They've always known that people were going to know the importance of our bloodline. So they're going to come across the same kind of thing that I did, hopefully to a lesser degree, because by that point then people will know that we're not people to mess with, because, we're karmic judges, and what you do to us comes back on you tenfold. How you treat us will have a knock-on effect in what happens to you later on down the road. And my students and my exes and that will be knowing that only too well. And, people like Donald Trump and all of that, they're all dealing with the fallout of the consequences of their direct actions towards me and my bloodline. Because I'm here to protect the other royal bloodlines. I'm the Holy Spirit, I'm the oracle. And so if you mess with me, you're messing with the other two, and then you're going to have to deal with the consequences. I'm just waiting for the king, just waiting for him to wake up. If he doesn't, then Great Britain and the Commonwealth will start again. But what I can tell you is, whatever Macron's planning, whatever the EU and NATO and all that are planning, it's not going to come to fruition, because people are going to rise up all over the world. Once Trump and Keir Starmer fall, all the other countries lose power. And then there will be no EU, and there will be no NATO. There will be no World Economic Forum. There will be no World Health Organization. It's all going to be dismantled. The powers of control will be dismantled. Most of them will be taken to court. Most of them will be executed or ostracized